Thank you, Christiane. 7:32 right now. More and more survivors of mass shootings are turning into victims themselves. There have been 3 suicides in the last week connected to deadly school shootings. Jeremy Richmond was found dead over the weekend in Newtown, Connecticut. His daughter was one of the 20 children gunned down at Sandy Hook Elementary back in 2012. This comes after 2 survivors of the Parkland, Florida high school shooting took their own lives. One of those students had been diagnosed with PTSD. So how does someone who is considering suicide get the help they need, especially after a major tragedy? Here this morning is Dr. Jonathan Stevens, Menninger Clinic's Chief of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, to talk more about that. Welcome to Houston's Morning Show. And a very important topic, because we have had tragedy like the ones that we're talking about in our own backyard.
Right, with Santa Fe, absolutely.
Yes. So what do you feel that parents, that families, of anyone who's gone through trauma and who's feeling what they even call survivor's guilt, where do you start with this?
Well, one is trying to dispel some of the fear that parents feel by looking towards preventing some of the symptoms that we're looking at. A lot of parents do not feel that suicide is something they could prevent, much like worry about seatbelts or alcohol or drug abuse or risky sexual behavior that they will talk about with their children. Some still feel that talking about suicide is taboo or plants the thought in a child's head, which is a myth. Does not happen.
Medical studies have shown that parents who talk about suicide with their kids do make a difference. It helps. But how do you have that conversation? What do you say to your children or to your family member that you're concerned
It's a really tough conversation to start. So try with timing. Don't try to get your child's undivided attention. Is that on the way to school? Is that about asking a child if their friends are talking about suicide or thinking about suicide? Asking open-ended questions such as, have you ever thought about not waking up in the morning, or that life is not worth living? But not being afraid of the answer, because for many kids, the answer could be yes. Use that as a conversation starter and said, well, what keeps you around, or what kept you going that day, or what did you do? And that kind of conversation, especially within the family home, is so important to dispel some of the stigmas around mental illness, but also, for many cases, the first line to getting help.
What is so heartbreaking so many times about suicide is the victim, maybe they leave a note, or maybe they've told people before, well, I felt like I was going to do a favor to everybody, that I wouldn't be a burden to anybody anymore. If they only knew their family never felt like they were a burden. So reminding them why they're important to you, I think, is really important as well.
Absolutely. I met many kids, and continue to meet kids, that feel suicide is such a secret that they can't let it out, can't talk about it. And when you begin the conversation, open up those thoughts that maybe I'm a burden to others or my situation's hopeless, opening it to the rational light of day oftentimes is so important to getting that help.
And then just telling them that you're not going to feel this way forever, that help can give you hope, and help can change that thought process so that you feel better about life.
And it's so hard not to use things like should or just, even with these shootings. Oh, you should feel lucky that you survived, but that sometimes stops a conversation instead of starts one.
Dr. Jonathan Stevens, thanks for your help.
Thank you, Melissa.
You guys do amazing work over there. Appreciate you trying to make a difference.
Thanks.
Good conversation.